Alright, this is Nicholas Brooks for FTT 101 Module 3 Week 3 assignment. It is September 1st. This week I need to identify different simple machines in the trigger function. For trigger function, any simple machines can be viewed right around the 7.5 to 8 second mark in the Ruger 1022 trigger function video supplied with the lecture this week. So there are multiple things. I'm going to focus on the hammer, which is acting as a wheel and axle, as well as the sear, which is acting as a wedge. You could even use the trigger, which is acting as a lever. Those three are working together in conjunction all at the same time. As soon as you depress the trigger, it is dropping the wedge, which is releasing the hammer. It's making things easier because if you remove one of those pieces from this particular puzzle, the firearm becomes inoperable and will not function. The hammer would just constantly stay up, which would essentially almost make it like an open bolt machine gun. For the short recoil locking, you have the slide acting as an inclined plane, and you have the barrel acting as a lever. As it drops down, as the slide is being forced to the rear, the barrel is being levered down into the crossbar. This can be viewed right around the 15-second mark on the striker fired barrel lockup video supplied in this week's lecture. This is an absolutely necessary function because of the style of firearm that this is. If the slide could not reciprocate and the barrel could not drop down, it would essentially be a single fired weapon. Fire it once and nothing on it would work. You'd have to go through, disassemble the firearm to be able to reload in your next round. And for the simple machines involved in the striker cocking and firing video, they can start being viewed at the 23-second mark. We'll start with the safety acting as a wheel and axle, and that is going to go through and follow into the actual trigger bar mechanism itself, which is acting as an inclined plane. Both of which are absolutely necessary for this firearm to function properly to ensure proper cycling of the firearm. Without those, the striker mechanism would not be able to penetrate through the slide to be able to ignite the primer. Alright. And for part 2 of this video, 4 topics that I found quite interesting and I didn't even realize were different things were controlled feed versus a push feed operation. Something I've never really paid attention to. And then another one was the supported versus unsupported chambers. It's stuff I've just never really paid much attention to. I've shot for a very long time. I've been working on and modifying my own personal firearms for a few years, and I've never truly paid attention to whether or not most of the things I shot were predominantly unsupported chambers. I do own one single shot 12 gauge that has a supported chamber, and I didn't realize that until this week's lecture. Another one that I found really interesting was the advanced primer ignition. I heard this was always a thing that you didn't typically want because after going through and watching the video on it, I can see why it would be necessary for some certain firearms, but not a battery detonation seems very risky to me. So it seems like there's a lot of potential issues to be had with that. And I have heard a lot of guys say that the firearm that was used in that video having a lot of reliability issues as far as malfunctions, and I personally wonder if that's not an issue to do with having the primer ignited before it's fully in battery. Another one I've always wanted to play around with would be the slam fire shotguns. I've always thought that was cool, be able to go through, keep your finger on the trigger, and as fast as you can pump it, more lead you can get downrange. I have no idea how many of these I've done so far, but I'll throw in another one or two just for shits and giggles. I guess another one that I found quite interesting was the difference between single stage versus two stage triggers. I'm very fond of my 1911s because 90% of the time they have a single stage trigger, and I guess that's why I've never been one for much of the Glock style to where go through, start squeezing, and never quite sure where that trigger is going to break. And I guess last one I'm gonna throw in here is the rifling in twist rate. This has thrown me down a absolute rabbit hole. I have paid attention to firing, or paid attention to twist rates in a lot of the firearms that I own and I shoot, and never quite realized how fast some of these more modern cartridges and how aggressive they are with twist rates. Now, instead of trying to use velocity with a slower rifling to stabilize the round, now they're trying to slow down the round through greater centrifugal force of making the bullet spin faster but slowing it down to make it subsonic for more hearing safe applications, to be able to run through things such as suppressors. Alright, and for a firearm of my own for this part of the presentation, it is a TSUS 1911 A1. Right here. No magazine, and barrel is clear, and there is no ammunition in my workspace. So one of the things about this is a controlled feed design with a magazine fed, typically holds between 7 to 8 rounds reliably, can be fed through the magazine on this, as well as it is a control feed. With it only having that single stage trigger, it's a nice, crisp, clean break every time, which makes it a very positive shooting experience. And with the controlled feed aspect of this, it helps aid in less issues of jams. In my personal opinion, I haven't had even a single malfunction out of this particular firearm. It has been my everyday carry for about the last year and a half at this point. I have been kind of torture testing this thing. So I've gotten very familiar, very close to having this thing on me at all times, and almost feels like an extension of my body at this point.